All right, looks like we still got a few folks rolling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started this evening. So my name is Zachary Dahl. I am interim director with the City of San Mateo's Community Development Department and project manager for the city's general plan update effort. I want to acknowledge before we get started the team that has been supporting this effort. And that starts with our core team here out of Community Development and Public Works. We've also got a technical advisory committee that's made up of staff members from all departments within the city, as well as the fire department, and then our consultant team led by PlaceWorks. So for tonight's presentation, we want to provide you with an overview of the Draft General Plan 2040. And we're going to have a couple of breaks along the way where we'll have some question and answers on the topics we've covered. Those will be shorter, and then we'll have a larger Q&A and comment session at the end of the meeting. But we want to give you a chance as we go over topics to pause, and then if there's questions related to the topic matter that we covered, you can send those as a chat message to Project Questions Carrie, and then we'll go ahead and answer those. And if we aren't able to get to your question, either under part 1 or part 2, don't worry, we'll make sure to get to it as part of part 3 at the end of the meeting. So our goals for tonight are really to provide you with an overview of the Draft General Plan and facilitate an inclusive and informed dialogue about where the city is going to go over the next 20 years. The Draft General Plan will include policies and actions that guide growth and decision-making for the city in the coming decades. And what we want to do is really foster a shared sense of possibility for the future, bringing in input and ideas from all segments of our community. And we also want to be able to answer any questions you have and collect your feedback on the Draft General Plan. And as always, we want to highlight this is just one point in the process. We've been working on this since mid-2018, so a lot of community input and ideas have gone into the draft that you see before you right now. So before we get started, we want to learn a little bit about you to inform us. So first, is this the first time you've joined a general plan event? How did you hear about it? And what kind of stakeholder are you? And so for the presentation at this point, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Joanna Jansen, our project lead with PlaceWorks, and she'll pick it up from here.
Thanks so much, Zach. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here this evening. We're very grateful to you for sharing your time with us. We know that you have many commitments, and we really want to understand who's here tonight and also who may not be here. So please take a few minutes and answer the questions that are on the Zoom poll that should have popped up on the screen for you. And after we have some answers coming in, we will share the results with everybody. We're asking folks to let us know whether or not this is your first time joining us for an event.
Joanna,
yes.
Can I just interrupt? I think that we lost the poll. So Lauren, can you relaunch it, please?
All right, does that seem to be working better? Yes, we're starting to get some answers coming in, so that's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we are asking you to share, if you will, whether or not this is your first time coming to a general plan event. Right now, it's kind of neck and neck between those of you who are first timers and those of you who are old hands, so that's really exciting. We would love to understand how you heard about the event. We want to know what's working in terms of getting the word out. We're doing a lot of different things, as you can see on this list, to make sure that people know about the general plan. So we want to know which of those methods are effective. And then finally, we're always curious to understand folks' in relationship to San Mateo. And we understand that you might have more than one different relationship to San Mateo. So you might both be a resident and patronize businesses. You might be a resident and a renter. You might be a renter and a representative of neighborhood associations. So and please answer as many as apply to you so that we can educate ourselves about our audience. We've got about over 92% response rate now. And I think that's pretty high. I'm seeing answers the pace is slowing down. So I'm gonna go ahead and nope, 27, 28, 100%, way to go. All right, thank you so much. Very much appreciated. This is of course not a scientific poll, but we really appreciate you taking a minute to answer these questions. I'm gonna stop it now and share the results. So about half and half, folks who have joined for a general plan event before and not, slightly more people who are coming to their first general plan meeting tonight. So thank you so much for that. That's very exciting. This process has been going on for a while, but we are welcoming new voices and we're really excited that you're here. Folks heard about the event. Most popular way was for the general plan newsletter. That's great. We did send that newsletter out to every residential address in San Mateo back in July. So it's a very pleasing to know that that caught your attention. City email is the second highest on our list, and the Strive San Mateo website is third highest. Really helpful for us. Thank you. So many of you, most of you are residents of San Mateo. Some of you also work in San Mateo. About 57% own property in San Mateo. And we also have some renters with us and some representatives of both neighborhood organizations and homeowners associations. So that's great. Thank you so much again for taking a few minutes to help us understand that better. All right, so that should be out of the way, right? Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and keep going with our PowerPoint. Just as Zach already mentioned, please do send your questions as they come up to Carrie. We're going to have 3 different pauses during the meeting tonight to respond to your questions. It would be a big help if you send them directly to project questions at Carrie. I know I'm talking. Because I'm talking, I'm also not going to be checking the chat. So if you send a question to me, I won't see it. So please do send it to Carrie. She's listed under project questions in the chat. And we'll be addressing those at several moments starting soon. So I want to start out by just grounding us in the vision statement that guides the general plan. This was developed with extensive community input early on in the process. And it resulted in a vision statement that says, San Mateo is a vibrant, livable, diverse, and healthy community that respects the quality of its neighborhoods, fosters a flourishing economy, is committed to equity, and is a leader in environmental sustainability. And that vision statement is supported by 5 values of diversity, balance, inclusivity, prosperity, and resiliency. So we worked very hard to make a general plan that really reflects and moves the city towards this vision and values. Here are some of the major milestones of the process in the past, especially if you haven't been as engaged with it. We started back in fall 2018 with the vision that I just, developing the vision that I just read. Then in 2019, we went into a process of identifying study areas where land use designations might change over the course of the general plan update. To further explore that, we created a range of land use and circulation alternatives in the fall of 2019. And we started rolling those out in March of 2020. And then the COVID pandemic came and kind of extended this phase of the process a little bit longer than any of us anticipated. But we regrouped, and through virtual engagement and other techniques, we were able to finalize the land use alternatives in 2021 and move on to evaluating them and selecting a preferred land use and circulation scenario. That's the basis of the general plan we're going to be talking about tonight. We then prepared goals, policies, and actions and other content of the general plan during 2022. and we prepared the draft and published that this summer for your review and your comments and feedback. All of these, I should mention, each one of these milestones was accompanied by extensive community outreach. We have had a general plan subcommittee working on this project. We've had multiple meetings with the Planning Commission and the City Council at each one of the milestones you see listed here. So that brings us to today. It's August 2023. We're in a phase of doing extensive outreach to make sure that folks are aware of the draft general plan. And then that's going to include further meetings with the general plan subcommittee that I just mentioned, the Planning Commission, and the City Council. We are also releasing a public review draft EIR that covers all of the potential environmental impacts of the general plan itself. And so I just want to make sure that you're noticing on the footer of all of these slides, our website. It's called strivesanmateo.org. And it is a place where we have compiled for you and for everyone in the community a lot of online resources to help you understand the general plan and the EIR and give your feedback. So if you want to read the full document, if you haven't seen it yet, that's there, but we also have shorter user guides and other ways to kind of introduce you to the general plan. This is also the place where you can find meeting dates for all of the meetings and the events that we're going to be having, as well as the draft EIR, and you can submit comments here. We have an FAQ about Measure Y and how that relates to the general plan. One cool thing is an interactive land use map. I'm going to show you the land use map later in this presentation. But if you're curious about your parcel or your neighbor's parcel or how your designations in your neighborhood might be changing, you can go to the interactive land use map at strivesanmateo.org and zoom in and out and click on individual parcels and find that information. So with that, let me introduce you to a little bit about the Draft General Plan 2040 itself. And I'm going to explain it at some depth, but I want to start with what we're calling the 10 big ideas. And for those of you that heard about this meeting through the newsletter, you might have already seen these as part of that piece as well. So this is really just trying to give you a sense of what's important in the general plan. What are some of the new things that are changing in this general plan that are different from the existing general plan that's in place today? These kind of are a distillation or a synthesis of a lot of different policies and actions that run throughout the general plan. So we want to balance growth and change, enhance San Mateo's neighborhood fabric and quality of life, while also preserving nature as the foundation of the city. We're going to encourage all different kind of ways to travel around the city, support the local economy, address historic preservation holistically, initiate a comprehensive sea level rise strategy, strengthen community outreach, focus on equity for all residents, and improve community safety planning and awareness. As I go through the presentation tonight, you'll see that there's a lot more than this in the general plan, but these are some of what we're calling the big ideas. So how is the general plan put together? The building blocks of the general plan are elements or chapters, and you see them listed here. So land use, circulation, the housing element, which is under separate cover and has been adopted already, the community design and historic resources element, conservation, open space, parks and recreation, public services and facilities, safety, and noise. These are the sections of the general plan that contain the policies and actions that will guide the work of staff and decision makers, like your council, your planning commission, and others. I'm going to go through each one of these elements and say more about what's in them. One point to make here is that every one of these elements is equally important under the law. So even though land use is the first element in the general plan, and even though it's one we talk about a lot, it's not the most important, and it's not more important or have more legal power than any of the other elements. All of them are equal. There's a couple of other important pieces to the general plan in addition to the elements. An introduction that explains a little bit more of what the general plan is and how to use it. Then we have the elements, and then those are supported by a glossary as well as an implementation plan. The implementation plan compiles all of the actions in the general plan, which I'm going to explain next, and then kind of helps the city keep track of those, who's responsible for them, what kind of timeline they have, what level of effort, etc. So the real meat of the general plan is the content that will be used by city staff, planning commission, and the city council when they're prioritizing initiatives or deciding what the city should spend money on or invest in, when they're reviewing and approving new development, and many, many different kinds of city decision making. And so that content is organized into goals, policies, and actions. A goal describes what's the result that we're trying to attain. A policy regulates activities. It's a rule that guides decision-making and directs ongoing efforts towards the goal. And then an action is something that we're going to do. It's a measure or a procedure or a technique that also helps to reach the goal. So goals are supported by both policies and actions. There's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship between policies and actions. Some policies might be implemented by more than one actions. Some actions might help to implement more than one policy. Here's a sneak preview of what a page of the general plan looks like if you haven't seen it yet. If you are familiar with the existing general plan, I hope it's immediately obvious to you how different this looks. We worked very hard to make sure that we're creating a general plan that is user-friendly. Part of that is making it easy to navigate, visually appealing, using clearer language, and trying to have a beautiful layout with lots of photos and a good page design. We each goal starts with the element acronym. So PSF in this case is Public Services and Facilities, and then each goal is numbered. Under that, the policy and action numbering is based on the number of the goals, so you can always orient yourself and understand where you are in the document. We use icons to call out the 3 general plan themes of sustainability, environmental justice, and community engagement. So what are those themes? These themes were directed to us by the City Council early in the process to make sure that we're weaving these throughout the document. So sustainability means helping to ensure that San Mateo can meet its current needs and leave viable resources for future generations. Environmental justice is the idea of reducing the unique or compounded health risks in San Mateo's equity priority communities. I'm going to talk more about that term in just a few slides. And then community engagement is increasing community participation in planning and development processes, just like we're doing tonight. I want to emphasize this point that these themes are woven throughout the document. Anytime you have a really important thing in a general plan, I just showed you this list of elements. It's very natural to think, oh, well, this should have its own element. And so there's always a decision to be made about whether or not we devote an element to a topic, or we spread that topic throughout multiple elements. In this case, we've decided to weave these 3 themes throughout every single element of the general plan, because each one of these topics shows up in different ways, in different aspects of San Mateo's physical environment. So for example, making San Mateo more sustainable means making decisions and taking actions that are related to land use, that are related to transportation, that are related to open space and public safety, and really every aspect of the built environment. So if we were to isolate an important concept like sustainability into a sustainability element, then what we say there about sustainable community design, for example, how does that relate to the community, the separate community design element? How do we know what to put there in one place or the other? So we decided to weave these all throughout to make sure that we're emphasizing these themes very comprehensively. So with that, let me dive into the land use element. We're going to go through each one of the elements tonight. And for each one of the elements, we have kind of a list of topics and then some examples of how the 3 key themes show up in that element. So these are the topics in the land use element: balanced, orderly, and equitable growth and preservation, Allowed land uses. This is also where we talk about heights and densities. The land use element talks about some specific areas like downtown and El Camino Real and Hillsdale. Environmental justice is addressed in some depth in land use element, although it also shows up in all of the other elements. Food access, community engagement, climate change and sustainability, economic development is here in land use element, as well as policies about development review, regional cooperation, and how to maintain the general plan going forward. So here's some examples of how the three key themes show up in the land use element. Under the theme of sustainability, the land use element includes policies and actions that encourage growth near transit and support infill development and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It supports environmental justice by encouraging affordable housing, prioritizing city investments to address disparities, increasing access to fresh food, and it addresses community engagement through policies about inclusive outreach methods and early and frequent community engagement, including with private development project sponsors. The general plan, the land use element includes the general plan land use map. This is kind of a pretty high profile piece of the general plan. So you might have seen a map like this. This is the basis for the city's zoning map. And it defines the different colors on this map correspond to land use designations. And those land use designations identify what kind of development is allowed where and at what intensity. So in the general plan level of detail, we want to set a range of allowed uses that's broad enough to give the city some flexibility, but precise enough to give clear direction on how this supports the city's overall vision. I mentioned equity priority communities earlier when we talked about environmental justice. And an equity priority community is a place where we see both a high pollution burden and also a high burden from other socioeconomic factors, low income, low educational attainment, and others. When we see a neighborhood in San Mateo where both of those burdens are combined, we've identified that as an equity priority community consistent with a state law called SB 1000. In San Mateo, that's the North Central neighborhood and the North Shoreview and Shoreview neighborhoods. Moving on from the land use element, the circulation element is really focused on reducing the number and length of vehicle trips, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, beautifying streetscapes. It addresses topics including multimodal transportation. Multimodal means lots of different modes or lots of different ways of getting around. Transportation demand management to reduce the number of trips. It also has policies and actions specifically dedicated to pedestrians, bicycles, micromobility, transit, roadway safety, traffic congestion, roadway improvements in the future, parking management, and future mobility and technology with things like electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles. We understand that this is a rapidly changing area and we want to try to stay abreast of that. Some ways that the key themes show up in the circulation element include sustainability is supported by increasing active transportation modes to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, for example. Under environmental justice, we want to prioritize new transportation amenities in those equity priority communities to make sure folks have access to opportunities, education, jobs, and other services. And for the theme of community engagement, we want to involve the community early in the process when we're thinking about any kind of circulation changes or improvements. And that includes engaging seniors, students, transit users, and many others. Just like the land use map, the circulation element also has a map that identifies future circulation system, including not only roadways, but also future transit, bikeway, and pedestrian improvements. And of course, as with many topics in the general plan, circulation and transportation in San Mateo is going to be supported and enhanced through other documents outside of the general plan. So examples for the circulation element might be the pedestrian master plan, the TOD pedestrian access plan, or the bicycle master plan. The general plan is really about giving that high level guidance that's then implemented in further detail in supporting and other supporting plans that the city will adopt and maintain. So that brings us to our first Q&A break. We are going to keep going after this, and we're going to talk about all of the other parts of the general plan, as well as a few more things. So you're welcome to submit your questions whenever they come up for you, but know that in part one here, we're going to try to focus first on questions about the general plan update process so far, land use element, and circulation element. And if you have questions about other topics, we're going to go through the presentation first, and then we'll be addressing those in later Q&A. So another quick reminder, send your questions to Project Questions Carrie. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can answer some questions. Carrie, do we have anything coming in yet?
We do. The first question I got is about the historical district designations. Does the general plan outline a process for historical district designation whereby the residents who live in the proposed district can vote by a 2/3 majority to approve the application?
So the general plan, as Joanna had noted, is a high-level document that kind of sets a framework for decision-making and future policies. And so with something like historic district policy and specifics like whether or not a vote of the neighborhood would be required, would be something we would investigate and make a decision on it when we update our historic preservation ordinance and look at establishing a policy with regard to historic districts. But we don't have that level of detail in the general plan itself.
The next question I received is, where can the public see large format land use maps in person? Libraries, question mark?
Yes, we actually just set up a couple of self-serve open house displays, one at City Hall, both at council chambers, and then also in our main permit center, and then also at the main library. So if you go in the main entrance there, so all three of those have large size land use maps that you can look at. And then also I would encourage everyone to take a look at our strivesanmateo.org website. We have a number of resources, including an interactive land use map, and so that allows you to zoom in and zoom out so you can get parcel specific land use designation information there as well. And then also there is a PDF of the land use map available if you want to download it, and you could just zoom in on that as well. So we do offer a number of different ways to view the proposed land use map.
The next question is, how do you define active transportation?
You know, I might defer to Joanna. I don't know if there's a set definition for that.
Sure. Yeah, I think for the purposes of this San Mateo general plan update, we're really focused on, transportation where you're moving yourself. That can have a pretty broad definition, right? Obviously, there's walking and there's biking. Those are probably two of the most common modes. But you could also be scootering, or you might be using a mobility device. And you might even just be walking from somewhere to get to transit, or from transit to your destination. So even transit can be included under that umbrella of active transportation.
Why isn't zoning west of El Camino changed to allow apartment buildings, increased density, etc., to increase balance and fairness within the city? All the development in this plan takes place east of El Camino and around El Camino.
The general plan at the front end of the process worked to establish study areas where the growth and change would be focused. And so, yes, the El Camino Real corridor, both sides of it, as well as the Caltrain corridor and proximity to the 3 Caltrain stations, were big pieces that inform the creation of the study areas. We do have study area 6, which is over off of Campus Drive and near the Laurelwood Shopping Center. But this was built around a community discussion and built consensus around these 10 study areas as being the focus points where the growth and change would occur around the city. And so that's also sets the parameters for later on in the discussion. We can talk about how Measure Y could be applied.
I saw office, residential, and mixed-use land use designations. Is there a way to define mixed use such that we don't lose retail and discourage office buildings, as exemplified by the developments planned for 3rd Avenue near downtown?
So what's important to note about the land use map is it's a high level designation, and there's many different zoning designations, which are much more specific in allowed uses and site development standards that occur within there. And so a mixed use land use designation indicates that we want to see flexibility, whether it's with housing, with commercial, with office. And so that could allow for a solely commercial district or more of a mixed use district. And say like for our C1 district, we could identify we want commercial on the ground floor and residential above. And so these land uses set the parameters, and then when we update our zoning map, the zoning designations will be much more specific, and you'll see a wider range that are consistent with the current mix of zoning designations we have that are focused around office, commercial, and residential as well at different densities.
Is there a timeline for the Peninsula Avenue interchange at Amplet Boulevard?
I know we're still in the design phase for that. I don't have a tremendous amount of detail before me. I know obviously funding is a big piece of it, and we're looking at different options to minimize disruption to the adjacent parcels as part of that project. So we are moving forward with the design, but we don't necessarily have a timeline for actual construction and completion at this time.
Does this plan align with transit plan?
Yes, that is the goal, that we were aligning this plan with our local transit plans as well as regional transit plans as well.
Do maximum heights include potential density bonuses?
No, so density bonuses can come in many shapes and forms. And so what we're focusing on is setting parameters for the heights and densities, and then ultimately through our zoning code amendment, other site standards that we want to see. But with state density bonus, projects can seek relief from certain site standards, and that includes height. So far, we've seen some projects seek height exceptions, generally not more than 1 story. Sometimes it's just a few feet. It depends on what the project is looking to achieve. So the height ranges that are identified here, a project utilizing density bonus could go beyond the maximum height limit.
There was mention about access to fresh food as a goal on one of the slides. I live in the Equity Priority Community area. Currently, there are several projects either underway or are in planning stages where retail has been or will be eliminated for building offices and housing. This is a reduction to services and food access for my neighborhood. What plans does the city have in their general plan to address this?
We do have a number of policies and actions that speak to that and seek to identify ways to preserve service commercial restaurants and grocery food store availability. It is a challenging environment, and ultimately projects are driven by economic needs or parameters that need to be met by that property owner. But our goal is, with the policies and actions in the general plan, to then refine those into both zoning code requirements and other policies to support that and avoid and ensure that neighborhood services, neighborhood commercial, grocery stores are in proximity and accessible to all areas of the city.
How is core infrastructure prioritized in the general plan? In particular, drainage pipe issues have come up in previous plans. Why was that issue not addressed via those plans in the past?
So something at that level of detail is generally more specific than is contained in a general plan. We kind of set policies and parameters with regard to something like stormwater investment, but ultimately there are more specific plans developed by the city that really get specific into size, location, and then ultimately it is a budgeting priority that would come before be made by the city council and then be completed through various capital projects.
Where is childcare in this plan?
Childcare is prioritized in a number of different ways in the city currently. And we do identify that in a couple different places within our land use element. But we do collect an impact fee right now that can go to support new childcare facilities, because obviously that is a key need, especially as our community grows. And this is something that will likely also be addressed as part of our updated community benefits program when we move forward with that policy.
And it is specifically in the public facilities and services element that we're going to get to later in the presentation.
It's impossible not to notice how much of downtown San Mateo is being proposed for very high amounts of office. Is there any limitation on this?
At this point, we don't have any specific limitations on office. However, I will note that for our office designations, there was actually policy direction provided by council to lower the height and floor area ratio or density of allowed office. And the city is looking at policies such as setting thresholds for minimum percentages of residential units in a mixed use project. And most of the city's residential or mixed use projects often include both office and residential. So we are looking at it in various ways, but at this point, there isn't a specific cap on office that has been set.
How does allowing higher housing density in North Central, such as 6-story buildings, improve any of the negative parameters you identified as existing in North Central, such as low environmental score, pollution, traffic, etc.?
So the higher density projects have been focused within our 10 study areas, and the North Central neighborhood is not actually within a study area. There are edges along the periphery of downtown and 3rd and 4th that are within the within that downtown study area, but the vast majority of that neighborhood is outside, and the land use map would be maintaining fairly consistently with what is currently allowed in terms of heights and densities.
Carrie, I don't know where you're at on your list, but I think we have time for maybe one more or so.
Okay, that's fine. And I do have another one that makes sense in the next section. But the last question is, has this project already been set? And I think they're talking about the general plan.
No, obviously there's been a lot of work and community input that's factored into the draft general plan that was published in July, but the key word is it's draft. And so that's why we're coming out and we're engaging with the community. We want to hear from you. This is the first opportunity for everyone to see all of this information together. We've discussed various facets up until now, but now the narrative, the goals, the policies, the actions, it's all in one place. And in many ways, I think we've heard concerns that things are being omitted. And so we want to illustrate now we have the comprehensive document that ideally is addressing everything and provides a narrative to give it context. But all of this is draft. And so that's why we're here answering questions, collecting input, because everything is still up to hone, to adjust, to modify, to best meet the needs of where the community wants to go.
Okay, thanks, Zach, and thanks so much, Carrie, for collecting those and sharing them with all of us. I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint now and keep going. We're gonna talk about another set of elements, and then we're going to have another break for more questions. So in the second set, I want to start off by talking about the community design and historic preservation element. We've already heard some questions about historic preservation, and we know that design and preservation issues have been very important to many of you in the San Mateo community. So we start with the natural landscapes and the urban forests that are really the foundation for the physical fabric of the community, also acknowledging archaeological and paleontological resources. And then we talk about historic resources that could be buildings or historic districts or other types of historic resources, sustainable design, public art, residential design guidance, and mixed use and commercial areas design guidance. And this is just another moment to mention where the city will also have additional design standards and design guidance outside of the general plan that supports the big picture guidance here. So how does this element support our 3 key themes? If we think about sustainability, the community design and historic preservation element encourages sustainable building design, like I mentioned, as well as, for example, new development that respects natural topography and minimizes the need for grading. And in case it wasn't clear, let me just comment here that these slides about the 3 themes are just meant to give you some examples. This is not a comprehensive list, but if you look at the general plan, every element does begin with a much longer list than this of where the key themes show up in the policies and actions. So take a look at that early in every element if you're interested. In terms of environmental justice, The community design and historic preservation element recommends adding climate adapted trees, especially in neighborhoods where there's not as much tree canopy today, for example, and also supporting low-income homeowners to be able to plant or replace trees on their properties. In terms of community engagement, it includes policies and actions about collaboration with Native American representatives and tribal governments and increasing public appreciation of historic resources. The conservation, open space, and recreation element includes topics of natural resources protection, access to nature, open space preservation. This is where we address creeks and riparian areas, as well as air quality, and parks and recreation, another topic that we talked about a lot throughout the general plan update. Some examples of how the key themes are expressed in this element include policies and actions that support sustainability by protecting the city's natural resources and really affirming the right of San Mateo residents to breathe safe, clean air. Under environmental justice, this element prioritizes the enhancement of natural landscapes in or near equity priority communities and requires mitigation for any activities that might emit toxic air contaminants. Under community engagement, it fosters appreciation for conservation opportunities through ongoing city programs and outreach, and also provides opportunities for personal enrichment and lifelong learning. The public services and facilities element addresses many of the really vital services that keep San Mateo functioning day to day, including police and fire. This is where we talk about water supply, sewer and storm drainage, another question that's come up so far, energy and telecommunications, other kinds of public facilities like libraries or community centers, children, youth, and schools. So this element is where we talk about childcare at several spots, but this element is where we really go into some depth about childcare as well as coordination with schools and the school districts, healthcare and social services, and also solid waste. So examples of how the themes are expressed in this element, public services and facilities. For sustainability, this is where we talk about protecting water quality, maintaining the quality of public services. So sustainability is about being able to continue into the future. We want to continue our public services. We want to support solid waste reduction and recycling and conserve water. Under environmental justice, the public services and facilities element provides for the equitable distribution of public services and facilities to make sure all neighborhoods in San Mateo are getting advantage to this, getting access to the same level and quality of public services and facilities, including efforts to provide better healthcare services in equity priority communities. And then under the theme of community engagement, this element supports community access to public facilities to foster social and other connections in San Mateo and to keep the community informed about public services and facilities improvements in San Mateo. The safety element is very important for keeping everyone in San Mateo safe. So this is where we talk about emergency readiness and emergency operations, geologic and seismic hazards, flood hazards, which I know is a topic of concern, sea level rise, also something we've heard a lot about through the general plan update, wildfire hazards, which are present on the west side of the city, and hazardous materials. So you can see here that the safety element is really focused on components from the physical environment that might pose risks or hazards to San Mateo. The safety element enhances sustainability by encouraging the use of natural systems to help protect the community against sea level rise and to clean up hazardous materials contaminated sites. It supports environmental justice by focusing emergency readiness in equity priority communities and other most vulnerable areas. And community engagement, for example, by keeping the community informed about safe and effective evacuation methods and ongoing support for the city's CERT training or community emergency response team. And then our final element is the noise element. So this is where we look in the general plan to find noise standards for both exterior and interior areas, and policies and actions that will measure and regulate noise and reduce and mitigate noise. Once again, it's an opportunity to mention supporting documents outside of the city, like the city's noise ordinance. So if your neighbor's having a loud party, that's really addressed through the noise ordinance, not through the noise element. The noise element is really more about the overall noise environment in San Mateo from things like Caltrain or like 101 and 92, for example. So the noise element addresses sustainability by acknowledging and seeking to improve noise levels in order to improve the health and well-being for community members, minimizing and mitigating noise impacts throughout San Mateo, including in some of the most impacted neighborhoods that are also closest to the freeways, and informing the community about upcoming land use projects that might either contribute to or be affected by a noisy land use environment. So that's it for the overview of each one of these elements. And I know, again, especially for those of you who are joining us for the first time tonight, you're absorbing a lot of information. So we've just talked about all of the elements of the general plan, including community design and historic resources, conservation, open space and recreation, public services and facilities, safety element, and noise element. So if you have any questions about the content of the general plan, we're going to pause again now to answer those questions. And once again, we're going to ask you to use the chat function and send your questions to Project Questions Carrie. We're going to take some time to answer your questions. And then when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about implementing the general plan, as well as Measure Y and other opportunities to get involved. So go back there and stop sharing. All right, Carrie, what have you got for us? Great questions, by the way, already, folks. Thank you very much. These questions are really show a lot of knowledge and care about San Mateo and a lot of attention to this process. So we're really grateful for your thoughtful questions. Thank you. Keep them coming.
All right. The first question is, how is light pollution addressed by the general plan?
That is a great question. I was actually just scrolling through the general plan to identify. I know we have addressed it in a couple different areas. If, in community design, we have a policy that speaks to nighttime lighting. And I believe that's the primary area where we address it. We also address lighting in a couple of different ways as part of some of our actions and policies within our conservation and open space element. But if there's specific ways that you think we should address it further, we would definitely welcome input and comments on that.
Joanna, there was a request to show the slide on which we want questions on, the topics we want questions on.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Let me share that again. And, you know, we just want to kind of give you some markers for where we're at in the presentation. We are going to have another opportunity for a Q&A. So we want to make sure we answer everybody's questions. We want to make sure we're prioritizing these, but if you have other topics, go ahead and submit them and we'll do our best to make sure we get to them.
All right, the next question is, in which ways is this general plan significantly different from the current general plan?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is a number of ways, both big and small. I think with the overall flow, the organization. So when you read through it, you might find pieces are in different places than they were before, and with the overarching goal of transparency and accessibility. So when folks look for a topic, it's in the place that's most intuitively, it should be most intuitively located. We're also really adding topics that haven't been addressed before, whether it's environmental justice, sustainability in a much more meaningful way, climate change, and a lot of topics that weren't as present back in 2010, the last time our general plan was updated. And it's very forward-looking. I think the goal with this general plan is to really look over the next 20 years and plan for how the community might grow and change, or want to stay the same, and what we might need to do to balance all of those factors as part of it. So I don't know if there's any one specific answer, but I would say a lot has changed both in organization and in content to be forward looking and address the community's needs over the next 2 decades.
How does the noise element address land use development and multiple developers working in the same area at the same time, causing negative impacts to neighborhoods?
So the noise element wouldn't necessarily get this specific. As Joanna mentioned with her overview of the noise element, it's looking more at existing noise sources, regulating indoor noise. The city's noise ordinance would actually be much more of a tool to address something like that, which sets construction hours and looks at maybe certain levels of noise which would or wouldn't be acceptable. But with gross and change there, that is a challenge. And so I think then again, if there's solutions or ideas out there for how the community can address that when we do have multiple projects under construction at the same time, we would definitely welcome that input and look to see the ways where we can minimize disruption to quality of life as these new projects are being built.
In the public services and facilities element, there's a reference to children, youth, and schools. Can seniors be added to this list? And a related question, San Mateo has a huge aging population that have lived here a long time. Anything new in the general plan to address their needs?
What was that first part? I'm sorry, I missed a word or two there, Carrie.
There was a request that we add seniors in addition to children, youth, and schools.
Yes, I believe there was a section that addressed seniors, but if not, that makes a lot of sense. So we can definitely look at that. But I believe there is a section of the general plan that does speak more specifically to seniors, but I don't have it at the tip of my tongue at the moment.
I think I would say right now, Zach, that what we have is a lot of individual policies, for example, policies in the circulation element that acknowledge or refer to the specific needs or perhaps, issues that seniors might face in getting around San Mateo. Policies in the open space and recreation element that talk about providing programs and activities for seniors, for example. So it's another one of those topics right now that's kind of sprinkled throughout because there are so many different aspects of development and life in San Mateo where we want to make sure seniors are acknowledged and included. And I'm hearing from the commenter that maybe we can consolidate that or add some emphasis there.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. And if nothing else, maybe in that area, we can reference where policies related to seniors are located throughout the general plan.
How does the city plan to support health services?
The health services question is a challenging topic because the city doesn't necessarily have direct control over the facilities and the services provided, as these are private or other entities. I know that the County of San Mateo does have a large health facility here in San Mateo, but by and large, healthcare is private. And so we do have various policies and actions that seek to support and encourage various aspects of healthcare services and facilities to ensure that the needs of our community are being met. But this is a topic where we are limited in how directly we can impact it.
I would refer readers to goal LU8 in the land use element, where that's where we have kind of the most specific and in-depth attention on health and well-being. Although again, that's something that we try to be mindful of throughout all of the elements.
The current general plan includes a commitment to complete the 1989 historic survey for the city, and the proposed general plan doesn't carry that language forward. Can you include that wording in the general plan to be consistent?
I think that what we tried to do was look holistically at historic preservation. We've received a number of comments on that. And so we wanted to start big picture, starting with updating the city's historic context and historic preservation ordinance, and then moving forward with surveys. However, I think at this point, if there's more specific language that is being sought, adding those as comments, and then that's an issue that could be elevated to the city council for direction on how we specifically want to address it, and if we want to change the language within that suite of policies and actions.
Can we add active actions around childcare by the city? I'm concerned the current actions are too passive and will not bring the high numbers of slots needed to support current and future childcare demand.
I think that's a great comment, and it's definitely an issue we can elevate to council. I think the key is understanding specifically what those actions might be. A lot of our policies are kind of geared toward future, more specific either regulations or detailed policies about how that could actually occur. But if there's specific input as to how we could be more specific or comprehensive in the general plan, we would love to hear about it. And then we could bring that forward for consideration by our decision makers.
State demographers now estimate California will have 3 million fewer residents than previous projections. Why is the state not approving the housing element in light of this change?
So the housing element is being prepared separately from the rest of the general plan update. And it is required to meet certain state standards and has an 8-year timeline to plan for, as opposed to the general plan's 20. We did recently just resubmit our housing element to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. So we are hopeful that we did adequately address all of the state's comments, but otherwise we'll continue working because the city's regional housing needs allocation of a little over 7,000 units, that hasn't changed. So we still need to develop a plan that satisfies state requirements for how we would have the capacity for at least that number of new housing units.
I have one more question. How does the plan address environmental justice by increasing housing density in the areas with poor environmental issues?
I think, as noted earlier, by and large, our equity priority communities, which are the North Central neighborhoods and the North Shoreview neighborhoods, are predominantly outside of our study areas. And so the general plan land use map is maintaining similar heights and densities that are permitted under the current general plan. I know there are portions of North Central that overlap within the downtown study area, so there could be some adjacency, but by and large, we are actually looking at not adding that kind of height and density, which would potentially increase displacement or other things on a community that needs help and attention, but we don't want to achieve that by displacing residents. So outside of the periphery edges that are adjacent to downtown, the land use map is not looking to increase heights or densities.
That's all for this portion.
Okay, great. Right on schedule. So we'll keep going with the third part of our PowerPoint then. Let me just share my screen once more, and I'm going to hand it over to Zach here in just a second. I'm sorry, hang on. This is the button I need. All right, we've been through the Q&A, so we're going to talk next about how the general plan will be implemented before I hand it off to Zach. So obviously the general plan is, only valuable if it's going to be implemented. And so this piece about what's going to happen next after adoption is really important. We're not to adoption yet. We're still gathering your input, and we've gotten some great input here tonight. But we are starting to think ahead about what comes next. So after adoption, city staff is going to be working to implement the general plan actions. Those will really become a to-do list for city staff, and they're going to form the basis of annual budgeting processes and departmental work programs, for example. So some of the actions in the general plan are daily things, the directions about what kind of information staff might share with the public at the planning counter, for example, or collaborating with other neighboring jurisdictions. Other things are really big one-time efforts or new plans and analyses to undertake. So, for example, one of those is preparing a comprehensive adaptation plan to reduce climate change risks. That's going to be one of the actions that comes out of this general plan. Inventorying historic buildings is something that we've already touched on. And then encouraging all ways to travel around San Mateo. So whether that might be through education campaigns or supporting bicycles or transit users through different types of improvements. There's all different levels and types of actions that are going to be taken to implement the general plan. And another important action is going to be updating the zoning code and other adopted plans that need to remain consistent with the general plan. And then making sure that the things that we say in the general plan are important show up in the city's budget. Zach already alluded to this, but of course, just like most of us, the city is working with finite resources, and each year, multiple opportunities, the council has to make decisions about how and where to allocate those resources. So there are a lot of ideas in the general plan. Not all of them are going to be able to be accomplished in year one after adoption. So ongoing incorporation and reflection of the general plan in the city's annual budget over the next coming decades is going to be an important piece of implementation. And with that, let me hand it off to Zach to explain a little bit about the relationship between the draft general plan and Measure Y.
Great, thank you, Joanna. So obviously an important factor, as particularly with the land use element, was the general plan's relationship to Measure Y. And so Measure Y, it was approved by the voters in November of 2020. It continued Measure P, and it's the city's growth and height limit voter approved initiative that sets height limits and density limits on new development throughout the city. And so concurrently with the preparation of the general plan, there was an awareness of at the beginning Measure P and then subsequently Measure Y, but then also balancing the relationship of the need to create housing sufficient to meet state requirements. And so as part of the discussion that created the study areas, there was a choice made to focus growth and change within 10 study areas. And one of the balances to build consensus was to put it along our major transit corridors in proximity to transit stations, and exclude single family low density neighborhoods. And so I think there was a question about why that the growth was not there was not more rezoning to the west of El Camino Real. And part of that was to balance and focus growth in areas where we could also reduce traffic and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So all of those went into building community consensus, knowing that we were probably going to have to go back to the ballot. And so in the meantime, we are dealing with a general plan that needs to relate to Measure Y, and at the end of the day, be consistent with Measure Y, while also planning for the future. And right now, we do know that with the housing needs of the community and to meet state requirements, we will need to look at heights and densities that exceed Measure Y. And so following the adoption of the general plan, we will need to look at going back to the voters to update or modify Measure Y. So within the 10 study areas, we have included 3 land use categories that include heights and densities that go beyond the Measure Y limits. So Measure Y sets a limit of 50 units per acre, and for the most part, a height limit of 55 feet in height. And so our medium 2, our high 1, and our high 2 designations all include heights that'll go up either to 6, 8, or 10 stories, and then with densities of up to 100, 130 or 200 units per acre. And so we also include a policy, since obviously when we adopt the general plan, Measure Y will still be in effect, and Measure Y does supersede the general plan. And so we do have a specific policy within the draft general plan that outlines that the voter approved growth limits would remain in effect, and any parts of the general plan that are inconsistent would defer to the Measure Y height limits until such time that either the voters modify Measure Y or it sunsets in 2030. And so the next step after a general plan adoption would be to look at bringing an updated ballot initiative. And right now, the parameters for that are looking at allowing for increased heights and densities as permitted within the medium 2, high 1, and high 2 within the 10 study areas. But then for all areas outside of the study areas, the land uses, heights, and densities would be consistent with the Measure Y limits.
And Zach, just because the question has come up a couple of times so far, I just wanted to point out on this map and on the study areas map that was on the previous slide here that if you're familiar with these neighborhoods, you can kind of see where North Central is and where North Shoreview and Shoreview neighborhoods are, just to give people a reference point for your earlier explanations about how those neighborhoods are not part of these increases in heights and densities that we're contemplating.
And one of the other things that, because this was a question that came up, and I think it's important to speak to, is the height limits and the density limits and state density bonus law, which allows them to go beyond. And so actually, these height ranges were actually dialed down. When you looked at earlier versions, when we were talking about these at higher level, like our place types menu, which had different low, medium, and high, the ranges for high were 8 to 12 stories. And so based on community comments that we had of concern that density bonus could allow projects to go even further beyond, the height limits were dialed back. And so medium 2 has a 4 to 6, high 1 has a 5 to 8, and high 2 has a 6 to 10. Neither of those go up to 12, knowing that in theory, a density bonus concession could get them closer. So these proposed height limits in particular are factoring in that additional height could be granted. And that was based on direction from the council as well as community input. And so we wanted to speak to that as well here. So also as part of this, throughout the entire general plan process, community engagement has been a major piece. And our decision makers have strongly encouraged that. They've wanted to see us reach out to all facets of the community, and particularly our hard to reach communities, but really everyone. And so this is really our last big community outreach and engagement effort as part of the draft general plan. So we really want to make sure that everybody that's interested has an awareness that this is going on and is aware of the different opportunities or ways that they could learn more or engage with this process and provide any input or thoughts that they have on any number of different aspects of the general plan. And so and we started when we published the draft general plan with a citywide newsletter that was mailed in July. Our virtual workshop here this evening. We are going to do 5 district town hall meetings around the community at the end of August through the end of September. We also are putting these self-guided open house boards at different city facilities. We're spreading sidewalk decals around the community, letting people know that the general plan is here and providing a QR code and the web link to how to get there. We added a number of resources to our website to help people understand various facets of the general plan. And we are also doing pop-ups around the community, whether that's outside grocery stores or in certain neighborhoods during high traffic hours, but also at other community events such as Nights on B or the Downtown Festival, Movies in the Park. So we want to try to engage folks wherever they are and help foster an awareness that this is out there and that people still have an opportunity to comment and weigh in. And also presentations to community groups that reach out and are interested. So for our 5 town hall meetings, our first one is coming up at the end of this month on August 31st, and this will be at the Senior Center. And then throughout the month of September, we will have 4 other town hall meetings, 1 in each district. But these are not limited to folks just in those districts. We wanted to go district by district to spread them around the city, but everybody is welcome at any one of these events. They'll be in person. We'll be providing information. We'll have staff available, a lot of different resources to kind of walk around, learn more about any element you're interested in, and staff members available to talk to you. So we really want to provide a comfortable, open environment to learn more, ask questions, and provide input. And then also in addition to that outreach and the town hall meetings, we are moving through our public meeting series, starting with our general plan subcommittee at the end of August. We have 2 planning commission meetings scheduled for September, and then we'll be going to council at 3 meetings. There are 2 regular meetings in October, as well as a special meeting on the 5th Monday of the month, October 30th. to review and discuss each of the elements and receive direction on what should go into the final version of the general plan. And so one other resource that we would really encourage you to take a look at is on the Strive website on the draft general plan page. We have a version of the draft general plan in this Convio format, which allows you to flip to any page and drop a comment next to any graphic, text, or anything else that might interest you to help facilitate feedback directly related to an area or a topic matter that's of interest to you. And as always, you can always email your thoughts or comments to generalplan@cityofsanmateo.org. So in terms of next steps, we did go over kind of briefly our next steps through the end of the draft general plan phase. But we are looking to, following our council meetings in October, we'll then move forward. And then concurrently, we didn't really mention it much tonight, but we do have our environmental impact report that was published on August 11th. We have a 45-day public review period. We've been reaching out to folks, making them aware, and that's also, that information about that is available at any of our city facilities where you can find a general plan display, and that's also on our website. Once that 45-day comment period is over, we'll be factoring in those comments and then looking to publish the final EIR as well as a general plan that's ready for adoption beginning of 2024, with a target to bring it before council for consideration for adoption in March of 2024. So at this point, that does conclude our formal presentation. So any questions on the third part of our presentation, as well as any aspects of the general plan, please send those in. We can start with written ones, but then we can also open it up for verbal comments as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you, Zach. All right, Carrie, what you got for us?
I have one question so far. It says, while each of the community outreach meetings welcome everyone, and these are in regard to the town halls, won't each one have a focus on the specific district in which the meeting occurs?
The answer to both of those questions is yes. So any of these 5 town hall meetings are open to anyone inside the city, or even if you're not a resident, but a stakeholder or have an interest, anyone is free to join. We will, in the first half of our presentation, cover the same content in all 5 studies and all 5 town hall meetings. The second half will include focus discussions or focus information on areas that are of interest to that district. So I think, for example, in District 5, we'll include some additional information about policies and actions related to the Hillsdale Mall properties or 25th Avenue. And then similar for other areas, District 2, talking about North Central, downtown. So there will be some focused discussion there, but we will also include content that is of interest to anybody in any part of the city.
What ballot will the general plan be on? Can it go on another later ballot?
So the general plan itself will not be on the ballot. What we're looking to do following adoption of the general plan, which has a target for first quarter of 2024, would then be to craft a ballot initiative that would be focused on the content in Measure Y and updating that to align with portions of the land use element. And so the target is that an update to Measure Y would go on the November 2024 ballot, and it would be focused on heights and densities. So the majority of the general plan doesn't directly relate to limits set by Measure Y, so it will be able to go into effect once it's adopted by council. For the portions primarily in the land use element that are inconsistent with Measure Y, they would not be able to be implemented until after a ballot initiative if it was adopted by the voters. And so what will be going on the voters, and we don't have an exact form of that yet, will be some sort of modification to Measure Y to align with what's proposed primarily in the land use element of the general plan.
Those are all the questions I have right now. Oh, one just came in. How will a state? Oh, go ahead, Zach.
I was going to say, if anyone has any verbal comments or questions you would like to add, go ahead and raise your hand, and then we can unmute you after we get through the written questions.
The last question I have is, how will a state law that regulates height and density affect Measure Y and the general plan?
any state laws supersede both local rules and Measure Y. And so I think that's the case with state density bonus law, where a project can seek a height or a density that goes beyond limits set by our general plan or by Measure Y. So depending on how it's crafted, state law generally supersedes local rules and local ballot initiatives.
That's really all I have now.
So is there anyone that would like to ask a question or provide a comment verbally? And we can go ahead and unmute you and give you a chance to talk.
All right, looks like we have a hand up from Kareem. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I was the one that asked that last question in regards to Measure Y in the general plan and state law. What's on the horizon? I mean, I know that there's been laws or bills proposed by Scott Wiener and that group. What do you see happening in that regard?
It's really hard to say exactly where Sacramento is going to go or what will or won't get passed in any legislative session. I think clearly housing has been a hot topic, and there's been a lot of legislation recently passed. I know in the community development department here, we're on our toes relentlessly trying to keep up with it and ensure that our processes are aligned with it. So it's hard to say what's on the horizon. I think with everything that's gone on, housing doesn't happen overnight. And so my thought is always at the local level where the rubber hits the road. And so I'm in favor of giving us a chance to let what has been adopted work and give us a chance to see how it's working. But I don't know what we will see in each of the next upcoming legislative years, if it'll continue to be aggressive and push the limit, or maybe give local jurisdictions a chance to catch up.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else out there who has a question or a comment? Kareem, I see your hand went up again. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sorry, I don't mean to monopolize this segment, but I'm also an ADU provider, and I did not hear ADUs or accessory dwelling units mentioned at all tonight. And I know that's part of the housing element that we're still working out. How does the general plan address affordable housing within the housing element and within that realm?
So the housing element is an element of the general plan, but obviously it's on a separate path and is being prepared outside of this general plan update process. We do have the most current version of our housing element posted to the city's website. If you go to community development, and you can see a link to our 2023-2031 housing element. We do have a section specifically that speaks about ADU production in the city of San Mateo, and we do have a number of policies and implementing actions related to ADU production, because we have set targets based on recent year permitting estimates that we are looking to achieve over 400 new ADUs in the next 8 years. And so we do have various ways that we're looking to support ADU production. But it is housing, affordable housing, and ADUs are primarily addressed within the housing element, so that the land use element speaks a little bit more broadly to residential uses within that larger context. But really the specifics about housing, ADUs, affordable housing are outlined in our housing element. So definitely take a look. And if you've got additional questions, please reach out to us or our housing team, and we can talk further with you. And Amy, I see your hands raised. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, yes, my name is Amy. I live in North Central. We purchased our home here almost 15 years ago. And part of the reason why we chose San Mateo as our permanent residents is because the city offered so many valuable resources of a larger city, yet it had such charm of a smaller community. And with all these proposals for high density housing and mixed use and things like that, how is the city going to preserve its charm? I'm concerned that we're going to become like, downtown Redwood City, where it's all high rises, or like, areas that it's just nothing but steel and glass. Like, where does the charm of San Mateo come into play with advancements in the city plan?
So the word charm, I have to note, because we just recently had a planning commission meeting that was discussing objective design standard for residential and mixed use with residential components. And a word that was coming out throughout that whole discussion was the word charm. And how does San Mateo maintain its charm? So I smile that you raised that up, because I think we are noting it's like maybe that should be woven into our objective design standards, because I think that's really one of our key challenges, and one of the things we are working to balance. And I think it can manifest in quality of life in many other different ways. And so is there a way to grow while maintaining kind of our core character, our core fundamental charm, for lack of, as we do that? And so I think in many ways we're trying to strike that balance, because there are larger factors at play that we need to factor for, which is, say, the housing allocation that was provided by the state. We have to plan for housing units. And so what we're trying to do is place them in a way that is the most logical, in areas that is best equipped to handle some growth and change, while also looking to preserve those key areas, our lower density neighborhoods, in a way that gives San Mateo its ability to retain its character, its unique identity. And so looking at whether it's the community design element or our land use element, I think you'll see we are making an effort to try to strike that balance. Also looking at growing in a way where it could also reduce vehicle miles traveled. So we are actually getting at reducing congestion, making our overall community more walkable. One of the things that growth and new development does is it adds revenue. It gives the city ability to invest in its infrastructure. And so with that, we can increase bikeability, walkability. We can receive park impact fees, which gives us the ability to invest in and renew, expand, modernize our parks. And so there are also benefits that can come with new development that provide added value to existing residents. And so I think there isn't necessarily any one answer, but we're trying to factor all of that in and balance these competing interests as we plan for the next 2 decades for San Mateo. Did any other written questions come in, Carrie?
No, there were some comments that came in and some expressions of appreciation for the council members who are attending, and a desire for more meetings on just each element to dive deeper into the topics.
Well, it's obviously there's a lot to cover. As staff, we're always available if there's a community group that is interested in a presentation or a focused area of the general plan. If you reach out to us, we can work to try to accommodate that and send someone over to talk to you about that. When this goes to council, we will have 3 meetings, and in the meeting, the elements will be grouped into different bundles so we can have more focused discussions on each element. And so, and then at the town hall meetings, we'll have a station for each element. And so if you're able to show up, we'll have a staff member at each station who can talk to you about your specific interests. So we would love to engage you however we can to answer your questions and do deeper dives into specific areas of the general plan, because obviously there is a lot here and we want to do our best to cover that and answer all questions and give you the information you need to know about our draft general plan.
Yeah, and I would just add to that too, Zach, that I think, part of what I heard there was a request for more facilitated discussion about the individual elements, but I did just want to take the opportunity to, again, promote this link that Lauren put in the chat to the Conveo version of the general plan. I know some of you who are here tonight have already looked at that and already started giving us your comments, but if you have specific ideas about lighting or about storm drainage or about historic resource inventories, that tool is a place where you can go directly to the parts of the general plan that talk about that in depth. and give your comments on if you would like to see different content, different wording, change to a map, etc. So if you are a person who wants to take a deeper dive, that tool is there for you. And we are excited about all the comments we've already got, definitely welcoming additional comments.
And one other thing to note is the target to wrap up was 8, but we're available to hang around until 8:30. So if there's specific questions or you're interested to maybe learn a little bit more about an area, we can kind of go back to a certain element and maybe talk about it a bit more. So that's always an option if there's anything specific you want to talk about here tonight.
Zach, that's a great cue. Before we get to 8, which was our designated sign-off time, in case folks can't stay beyond 8, I just want to share the next steps once more. And I think most importantly, say again, strivesanmateo.org. We've provided a lot of information this evening. If you didn't write down all of those meeting dates or all of those links, you can go to strivesanmateo.org. We've done our tried to make it really clear and easy for you to find what you need and what you're looking for. So please do use the website as a resource. And as Zach said, you can take a look there at the published draft environmental impact report that's going to be out for review now through most of September. You're welcome to join us at the City Council discussions of individual elements happening at October 2nd, 16th, and 30th. And then after we've concluded the public review in this stage, we're going to be publishing a final EIR in early 2024, and then taking the draft general plan through the adoption process with the Planning Commission and then the City Council in the first quarter of 2024. So that's what we have to look forward to as next steps. And I'm sure that Zach will want to join me in thanking all of you for your attendance and your great questions and input tonight.
Yes, thank you very much. And I look forward to meeting you in person at our upcoming town hall meetings and in hearing from you, because I think there's a lot of great input. And the general plan is where it is because of the community input we've received, and I look forward to getting a whole lot more so we can continue to build and make it the strongest document possible. So looking forward to a lot more engagement and input in the coming months.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to stick around for a few more minutes and see if anybody has any further questions that they want to ask, but you're also, of course, free to go and get on with your evening, and I hope you have a great one. Thanks for the applause, Sarah, much appreciated. Thanks, Amy, Mia, and Ben.
I did get a question in the chat. There's a lot of mixed and dedicated office space going up around downtown. Given all the local and global news around increasing office vacancy rates, have developers of these projects given you a sense of how long or short they'll take to fill, and what kinds of companies they'll fill up with?
At this point, oftentimes we don't have specific tenants identified, but we have been talking to developers. And so I think you've got a lot of kind of micro, I would say, climates when it comes to occupancy around the Bay Area. And some of what I've heard is that San Mateo, for a number of factors, its location on the peninsula, proximity to a place where people want to live, as well as transit and other factors, it is still, from what I hear, a desirable place for companies to locate, and so that there is still reasonable demand for office space here in San Mateo. But I also have been starting to hear a shift where we do have a number of existing office buildings that are under-tenanted or significantly vacant. And we've heard from those property owners who are actually looking to submit applications to redevelop more with more residential uses. So I think this is going to continue to evolve in different ways. But I think actually the existing office that's maybe not to the same quality as the new office will probably be the first space to be vacated and have a harder time tenanting, whereas the newer Class A office space will probably continue to be more desirable for companies that want to move here. So I think you'll see it manifest in different ways, but obviously right now, I think there is an overall softening of office demand. And I think we've seen that in some of the more recent inquiries, these applications haven't come in where property owners are looking more at residential than at new office.
Great question. We threw a lot of information at you. I'm sure it probably generated some questions. What else can we answer?
Well,
Seen any questions coming in the chat, Carrie?
No questions. There's 3 words. It says milestones progress report. I think they're asking when that will be happening.
So I guess the first goal is to get it adopted. And we actually do have a state requirement to provide annual progress reports, both on our housing element and our land use element. And so I would imagine once our general plan is adopted, we will be providing annual progress reports on how we're doing in various aspects of the general plan. But I think really the key first step is getting it adopted. And I see Maxine, you have your hand raised if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, guys. Yes, just a quick question. You said that the general plan was not going to be on the ballot, but Measure Y included the entire general plan. And there's a lot of language in each policy in the general plan. Now, I'm sure there's some words that are going to, there's not a problem with making things clearer, but if there's any policies that have been changed in any of the other elements, it seems to me that's also a Measure Y issue. So, it was a surprise to hear you, say that the general plan wasn't going to be on the ballot, but I just was wondering if you've discussed how you were going to be approaching that, because like I said, Measure Y, what people voted on was essentially the general plan.
That is ultimately the form that the update to Measure Y takes will ultimately be a decision made by City Council as to how they want to see that ballot measure go. Measure Y predominantly addresses the addresses policies, actions, and specifics within the land use element. But there's a lot of the general plan that exists now that's outside of Measure Y's purview. And so it has the ability to be amended and updated without consideration of Measure Y. But any aspect of Measure Y that's inconsistent with the general plan would continue to default to whatever's in Measure Y until such time that it's either sunsets or is modified. So the updated general plan does shift in how its language is formed. And so it focuses on adhering to the key principles of Measure Y, but it doesn't incorporate the specific language that was in Measure Y. So that would be part of what goes before the voters, would be a shift in how Measure Y is applied. But exactly how that's done is still part of a community conversation and ultimately council direction.
Thanks for that question, Maxine. Anybody else? I'm very happy to answer your questions. And also, if you don't have questions, we're happy to bid you good night. So we're gonna close it down here unless folks want to pipe up with some additional questions or comments. But if you do, now's your chance, go for it. All right, Jake, thanks for the claps. I'm gonna take that as a no, Zach.
I think we might have a wrap.
All right, those of you who hung in there